What's going on, everybody? I'm System Check 66. Welcome to my Resident Evil 3 review. Now, just quickly before we get into the review, I made a previous version of this, or at least I recorded a previous version of this, and I didn't like it. It was way too depressing, way too negative as a review, and it just didn't gel well with me. So I'm re-recording this. This is the new one. So I hope you like it, and it can at least lift your spirits a little bit, even though there's going to be some negatives and some positives. On with the review. Good points first. I like that the game is thematic. It's way more thematic than previous titles, I personally feel. And I like how the UBCS soldiers are handled, Jill's character, her redesign, Carlos's redesign, all the characters, motion capture, everything is on point. Graphically, the game is as good looking as Resident Evil 2 Remake. It's not an advancement, technically, like the 1999 version of Nemesis was compared to RE1 Director's Cut and also Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil 2, but it is as good looking as RE2 Remake, and Raccoon City does look cool. Now, in previous videos I said the neon lights and the overuse of lighting in the game might annoy me a little bit, but I've since changed my opinion. Having played through the game, I don't mind it all that much. Like, it actually lights up the city quite nicely. Some of it's a little bit too garish for my liking, but it never really ruined my enjoyment of exploring Raccoon City. Though I will say the donut shop just reminds me of the pizza place from Toy Story. It still does, even when I was going in there. Well, not in there, but seeing the outside of it. Yeah, I got a lot of Toy Story vibes, and it makes me wonder, were the team influenced by Toy Story when it came to designing this donut shop? I don't know, but yeah, Capcom have put weird stuff in their games and in their Resident Evil games before, so it wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, all in all, I like Raccoon City and what you get to explore of it. Nemesis' design, his redesign, perfectly fine. I actually like this new version of Nemesis. He's really cool when he does appear, and that's something we'll talk about later, but for the time that you spend running away from him and him coming after you, yeah, really, really cool. He gets a choice of two weapons, a flamethrower and a rocket launcher. They are both handled in a certain way. In the original, he would either have his rocket launcher on him or sometimes he might not. In this, he gets a moment where he uses his rocket launcher during this scripted segment, and you get to fight him with the flamethrower during this boss segment. The flamethrower boss segment, I was a huge fan of. Really, really enjoyed that boss battle. The rocket launcher segment, it was alright. It was okay. Like a lot of segments in this game, those moments only last a couple minutes at most, 2-3 minutes, and then that's it, it's over. This game, like I said, is a lot more thematic and there's a lot more scripted sequences in it. So a lot of these moments only last a couple minutes. Like even the boss fight where he has the flamethrower, that doesn't last very long, though it is extremely enjoyable. If I had to sum up the game's story, its plot, the way it plays out, and these scripted moments, the moment-to-moment gameplay as well, it's all handled quite well. Quite well being the main word that I'm using. It has great production value, much like the Remake 2, much like Resident Evil 7. These games are hitting a certain level at the moment when it comes to production value and how good everything should be and how good everything should look. A lot of people don't like Alien Covenant, but there's no denying that Ridley Scott knows how to make an Alien film and how he wants it to look, and everything looks good. Okay, so it's the same thing with Resident Evil 3 Remake. Everything looks good. It has a top production value. I can easily say that's one of the game's biggest strengths and strongest points is its production value and just how good it looks. And just like the Resident Evil 2 Remake, the zombies in this look sick. Like, Capcom know how to make a zombie. They've done it with Dead Rising, they've done it with previous Resident Evil games, and in this they look just as good as they did in the Resident Evil 2 Remake, even if they've literally been, copy and pasted over from the RE2 Remake, which they have some of them. And it doesn't just stop with the zombie designs. Like, all the other monsters, the bioweapons are cool. They look great. They look sick. I'm happy with them. The Hunter Gammas, they look fine. They reminded me a lot of the G-Mutants. They even appear in the sewers, like in a sewer section in this game, much like the G-Mutants. They act similar to the G-Mutants in some ways. They have one-hit kills, all this other stuff. But if they do catch you, because you don't have any defensive items in this game, you're dead. They'll swallow you whole. But yeah, I was a fan of the Hunter Gammas, and they essentially replaced the Hunter Gammas from the original Nemesis. So yeah, they take their place. But they're very, very cool. Very cool. Then we have the redesigned Hunter Betas that you meet in the hospital first time with Carlos, and I love the way that they call back to Resident Evil 1, with the hunters and the hunter vision, where they're coming after like Chris or Jill, and you can see it from their point of view, and then they open the door and there they are, and that's the first time you meet the hunters. And in this, they have a callback to the the Resident Evil Remake as well as Resident Evil Director's Cut. So they're a mix of classic hunter design and also an insectoid type bioweapon, so something like the original Drain Demos or anything like that. So they're kind of mixed together, and they're a bit insect-like as well as being like the old hunters. They resemble the old hunters, the classic hunters. So yeah, very happy with their design. And they're quite hard to take on as well. They're quite tough. So I was playing on normal, and yeah, they were a pain in the ass to put down. I like that. Hunters have never been easy to put down. That's why they're one of my favourite bioweapons in the entire series. And I think they might be my favourite #1 bioweapon, you know, in the whole series. So I really like the hunters in this. I can be very picky when it comes to the hunter designs and things like that. And there's only a few, maybe 2 designs that I've seen previously. One from Outbreak and one from that Dead Aim game where I didn't really like them. Other than that, they've never really fucked the hunter design too much. I've always been relatively happy with how they design them, and in this game, it's no different. I like their redesigns. I do. And they don't stray too far away from the beta designs. The only thing that's missing is probably like the huge tumor that comes out of their arm. They've changed that and they've made them more insect-like. Like I said, look a little bit more insect-like. So, but it's just as creepy. Like, the body horror in this game is still really, really good. Just like the Resident Evil 2 remake, just like Resident Evil 7. And being a fan of films like The Thing, you know, and all these other films, I can't think off the top of my head I can remember, but there's tons of body horror films I'm into and I really like, and this game has a lot of great body horror like moments in it. Then we move on to the Plaga type zombies. I'm not too sure of the name. I'll have to play it again and read through the memos and the letters and stuff, you know, and faxes. But yeah, we have these Plaga type zombies, and they're cool. They're alright. You know, I didn't mind them. So they've implanted this parasite into the Nemesis, and he can now sort of mutate these zombies and stuff, and they're cool. They're not overused, they're not overdone, and they appear at certain points, and they, you know, they give the player a little bit more of a fright and a little bit more of a harder thing to kill, you know, so I quite like them. They're almost very similar to just a Plaga type zombie, definitely. They have like a whip that comes out, and there's like a yellow glowing spot that you have to shoot, you know, because in these games there's a lot of yellow glowing spots that you have to shoot, and that's one thing I will say, that they, you know, they've kind of made the Resident Evil series a little bit tamer and a little bit easier for new players and things, and that's how they do it, really. In the older Resident Evils, you just let rip with your guns, to be honest, on an enemy and hope it dies. That's kind of the old school mentality of Resident Evil games. In this new kind of iteration of Resident Evil, with the RE2 remake, with RE3 remake, and even RE7, they have kind of like these eyeballs or shit that you know you have to shoot, and these things are no different. They've got this yellow glowing sort of just spot that you know you have to shoot it, and that's how you take them down. But yeah, they're cool. I like those. We get the return of the Cerberus, or zombie dogs as they're also known, and that's great. They actually made me jump a few times, so I was happy to see those back in the game. The Drain Demios make a return, but this time they're a little bit smaller, and they're not actually juveniles like I had said previously, or babies. That's how they are, like, I guess, fully grown, but there's loads of them this time around, as opposed to the original Nemesis. They're a little bit bigger in the original Nemesis, and they're more of a threat. I like them better in the original Nemesis, but I didn't mind these versions of them. They do try and implant, like, these eggs into Jill, and she has to eat a green herb to sick them up, and it's pretty cool. It leads to, like, this game's version of getting poisoned, so I quite like that. It says you're infected or implanted or some shit. And the build up to them is really good as well. Like, you get this memo from this dude, his belly like splits open, all these bugs come out, and he says, you know, if they get you and they implant you, like, yeah, they fuck up your day. So yeah, it leads to you go into this nest, the Drain Demios' nest. It's the only time we ever see them, but it's a really, really standout moment in this game. It's one of my favourite moments in this game, and it calls back to all the older Resident Evils. I've got a lot of nostalgia, and had a lot of love for it because it was a callback to older Resident Evils. So it reminds me a lot of the power room, the generator room from Resident Evil and Resident Evil Remake, and the Chimera scuttling across the ceiling, you know, grabbing Jill with their hook hands. Yeah, I got a lot of vibes of that here, and I loved it. I loved that moment. It's nothing but a simple restore power via these generators, you know, to the train type of puzzle, but it's cool the way it's handled. The production value, like I said before, second to none, and I love that it reminded me of older Resident Evil games. And when the game does things like that, it does them successfully, and it excels with those type of moments, and I wish there was more in this game like that. The only other moments I can remember that had me a little bit anxious and a bit tense and were a little bit scary, like this nest, the Drain Demios' nest, were the hospital moments with the hunters and a couple others, like I'd say the Paleheads in the nest too, things like that. Moving on to the next bioweapon, the Paleheads, they return. I think they were featured in Ghost Survivors, and yeah, they're creepy looking, they're grim. Like, they're actually tougher than the Nemesis, I'm not going to lie. I was putting round after round into one of these things, 2 of them died, and one of them just would not fucking die, and I didn't know how to get rid of him. So in the end, I just used the Magnum and then a grenade round, and it put him down. But these things are OP, like, they're really tough. So that was interesting. It was a bit weird. I didn't understand why they were like even more OP than something like the Nemesis, but yeah, some of these power heads, they're tough as fuck. But they look great. They look a little bit like the clickers from Last of Us. That's the vibe I was getting from them. But yeah, I like the power heads. They're essentially like the naked zombies from the old Resident Evils, like Resident Evil Remake. If you've got the GameCube version, I think they're still in there, but I think they were taken out when it got, you know, ported and stuff. And the power heads are essentially naked zombies, but they look more fucked up. Like, they don't have any eyes and stuff, like, if I can remember that right. And the Licker makes an appearance in this game as well in the RPD, so it gets a little cameo appearance. You only see 2 of them, but you can take them out as Carlos. And that's all we get in terms of bioweapons in this game. It's lacking, definitely, in terms of the roster that was in the original. There's not as many. There's no brain suckers, no flatworms, no gravedigger. We will get into that a little bit later, you know, when it comes to the negatives. But for now, I like the roster of bioweapons that we did get, at least. I touched on the graphics earlier, but the graphics are a standout in this game. Like, all the character models, like I said, look incredible. And I love the way that they've gone a little bit more in-depth with the UBCS, you know, soldiers and stuff. And we get a little bit more backstory on these characters. Tyrell isn't relegated to just a quick appearance. Like, he is present in this game quite heavily, and I like that. He's one of my favourite characters, definitely. And I like the new Nikolai. He's as dastardly and as much of a shitbag as he is in the original, and yeah, nothing's really changed. Mikhail's really good in this as well, and we get a little bit more of him. So, you know, like I'm saying, we get a little bit more character development in this game when it comes to the UBCS soldiers. They're not just throwaway, like, Nemesis victims, essentially, or just victims in general of Raccoon City. So I really like how they portrayed them in this, and it does do that better than the original. That's one thing I will say. Their characterization is a lot better than the original, which is to be expected, you know, but still, it's great. I also like how, during one boss battle with the Nemesis, Jill basically references what Mikhail says earlier, you know, when they're on the train, and she says something along the lines of, yeah, come and get it, shitbird, and it's exactly what Mikhail says to the Nemesis. So I love that. It's a little kind of reference to earlier events, and, you know, her calling him a shitbird, which Mikhail calls him. Guns in the game are fine. Yeah, like, you get your typical shotgun, your handgun, your grenade launcher, and then a weapon at the end, which is a rail cannon. It's a little bit like Fortune's rail cannon from Metal Gear Solid 2, but a lot bigger. It's handheld this time, unlike the one from the original Resident Evil 3. And it leads to, like, this very anime style cutscene and boss battle. I will say that. Like, there's a part where, you know, Jill fires the rail cannon and it cracks the floor underneath her, and there's just like this energy wave or whatever it is, this energy field. It was a bit weird, definitely it was a bit weird, but I like that this game isn't afraid to have a laugh. I will say that, you know, there are Mega Man references, there are all these funny references and stuff, and it does, you know, have fun. Like, it does have a laugh at itself and doesn't try to be too serious. Myself, along with fans of older Resident Evil titles, have always loved this series for being a little bit campy. It's serious, and it has serious tones and elements and things like that, an atmosphere, but it's always been a little bit campy as well, and we love that. But it has the production value of, like, a top piece of science fiction media, like a film or a book or something that just has that level, you know, that science fiction reaches. And Resident Evil has always had that. It's always treated its science fiction elements and its horror elements with respect, and that's why this doesn't bug me too much. Yes, it's more silly and a bit more campy than the original Nemesis, but it doesn't bug me all that much. It's probably the most out there boss fight in Resident Evil history, in my personal opinion, and it's way, way less realistic than the original's boss fight with the rail cannon and the Nemesis and stuff like that. But I still don't mind it. I still like it for what it did, because I've grown up with this series being campy, and something that's campy in this doesn't offend me too much. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not as serious as the RE2 remake or RE7, like, and, you know, it runs with that. However, Capcom say that they're trying to go for the more realistic route and realism and all this other stuff that they kept speaking about. The only reason why people have leveled criticism at them for that is because they brought it up and they started talking about that sort of stuff. And this is so far from being realistic, it's untrue. This is the most unrealistic remake to date. More so than the Resident Evil remake, the RE2 remake. It is. And another thing that I can say a positive is that the game is short but sweet. Although that is a bit of a negative towards it as well, being so short. But at least, you know, it kind of grabs your attention from start to finish. Although I will say personally, on a personal level, there are parts of the game that really bored me. I'm not going to lie. Especially the overuse of some cutscenes where it's literally like Metal Gear 4, like Metal Gear Solid 4 levels of of cutscenage, where you walk a little bit and there's a cutscene, you go through a door and there's a cutscene. Like, it did that a lot of times, and I tended to get a little bit bored because I'm used to Metal Gear being Metal Gear and Resident Evil being Resident Evil, you know, and Uncharted being Uncharted. I'm not used to those combining into a Resident Evil game. I'm used to exploring for long periods of time, you know, solving puzzles, defeating some enemies, and then getting a cutscene. I'm not used to going through a door, getting a cutscene, you know, playing it for like 5 seconds and then getting a cutscene, and this did a lot of that, definitely. But while it lasts, it does grab your attention from start to finish, and it does keep you, you know, involved. Having said that, this game is shorter than a 5-year-old's attention span if Peppa Pig isn't on, so like I said, it's a bit of a negative as well, and they could have made it a lot longer, and we'll get into that in the negative, like, part of the review. And I will say that when the game lets you explore and backtrack, and the fact Jill gets a lockpick because she is the master of unlocking, so I was so happy to see her get a lockpick, and after she gets it, that's like her best weapon, her best tool. She goes around just unlocking doors and stuff to places we haven't got to, you know, previously, and lockers and all kinds of stuff, boxes that have ammo in them. Yeah, so it's really cool. And when you get that lockpick and you can go and backtrack, they were some of my favourite parts of the game, you know, where we get to go back and explore, because I love Ari for that. There's only 2 puzzles in this game, and I can't actually remember them, so yeah, but you do pick up some gems and stuff, and that leads to this puzzle where you can just put the gems in. It's not really a puzzle, to be honest. You just slot the gems in, and it's basically like, do you remember the puzzle that locked the gates to Michael Warren's statue, yeah, from the original Resident Evil Nemesis, if you're familiar with the original? It's basically that puzzle, but it's small, and it's like a clock. It's in a clock. Hard to explain if you haven't seen it, but it's in a. You probably might have seen it having played the demo. It's in a clock. It's on the front of this clock, and you put these 3 jewels in, and then it reveals like basically a pouch upgrade and some ammo. And yeah, they kind of took that from the original, and it's just not as epic or as significant. But yeah, they put in this game, and that's one thing I will say. The biggest positive is at least this does try to follow the beats of the original, you know, the original game and the source material. But in other ways, it fails. And now, having said the positives, we're going to get into the negatives, and like I said, the negatives do outweigh the positives, and yeah, this is why it fails as a remake. There are no branching paths anymore. That means that there's no randomized enemy encounters in this game. There's no branching paths, which means there's no different ways the story plays out, and that leads to it not being as replayable. People who aren't familiar with these games aren't going to want to replay it. They're probably going to sell it after they finished it, to be honest. For some people, they're going to buy this game, and the length of it, as well as the fact there's no replay value, they're going to be pissed. I would advise you not to spend £50 on this game. That's one thing I'm going to say at this halfway point of the review. Do not spend £50 on this game. Wait for it to go down. It should have come out at 25, much like Lost Legacy, Uncharted Lost Legacy, or the Shadow of Colossus, you know, remaster, remake, remaster. Still up in the air as to what it is. I think it's a remaster, personally. If I had to match this up to something like Uncharted Lost Legacy in terms of product, Uncharted Lost Legacy wins, hands down. That's like a 9 out of 10, and this, unfortunately, is a 7.5 out of 10 game. It really is. It's not worth the £50. It should have been released for 25. They gutted the shit out of this game. I have to say, they gutted this game so much, and it suffers for it. It really does suffer for it. Whereas the Resident Evil 2 remake gutted a few things, but it never really, like, annoyed me. This annoyed me, the amount of stuff they gutted. My message to Capcom is literally this. If you wanted to make a game that was in a similar vein as this, yeah, and title it a different Resident Evil title, then you should have done that. This is a remake of a classic game that I have played for hours upon end, you know, countless times. It's a classic, a PlayStation classic, and this is a remake based on that classic. And I'm sorry, it fails hard as a remake. It really does. And before anyone says, yeah, but it's a remake, that's what it's supposed to do, it's not supposed to be exactly like the original, that's fine for you, okay? If you haven't played the original and this is your first time with something like Resident Evil Nemesis, that's cool. But for people who love the original, you know, and have played that countless times, this is a failure as a remake. As a normal Resident Evil experience, if it wasn't even a remake, it's still a 7 out of 10 experience. That's the thing. It's a 7 out of 10 Resident Evil game. Literally. If I look at this game as a Resident Evil game, a standalone Resident Evil product, yeah, without rose-tinted glasses on, I'm not thinking about the original Nemesis and all that stuff, it's still a 7 out of 10 Resident Evil game. That's the thing. Whether you want to say, well, it's still a remake, none of that comes into play. If you want to want to talk about the fact that it should be sort of looked at as its own thing, it's still a 7 out of 10 experience and a 7 out of 10 game in general. So there you go. That's my answer to your argument about that sort of stuff. This isn't a bad game or a bad experience overall. It's just, it's depressing at how good it could have been. That's the thing. It gets me down at how good this could have been, how excellent this could have been. It could have been better than the Resident Evil 2 remake. As it is, this isn't nowhere near as good as the Resident Evil 2 remake. As time's passed, I think I would give the Resident Evil 2 remake a 9 out of 10, but the very first Resident Evil 2, the original, as well as Resident Evil remake, you know, the remake of the first game, I give them 10 out of 10s, like those two games, and then I would say the remake of 2 comes in at third place after the original Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil remake, then it's RE2 remake. That's on my scale, that's my list of my favourite Resident Evil games. And it's got nothing to do with old Resident Evil versus new camera angles versus, you know, third person over the shoulder. It's got nothing to do with that. I just like Resident Evil 2 remake that much. But I still love the old Resident Evil games as well. I even have love for Zero, and Zero is like a 7 out of 10 Resident Evil game. But I still have love for it. I've played it enough times. You know, Code Veronica, all those games. If you're familiar with me as a content creator and as a Resident Evil fan and one that's been there since Resident Evil Director's Cut, you'll know exactly how I feel on each game if you've gone and watched my podcast or listened to my podcast or you've gone and watched my previous videos. So, do you know what I mean? It's got nothing to do with old versus new, fixed camera angles versus over the shoulder, you know, third person. Nothing to do with that. It's just that after Resident Evil 4, which I did enjoy, and then RE7, which could have been its own thing entirely, it didn't even have to have the Resident Evil name or links to the rest of the Resident Evil series. It could have been its own survival horror game. With all the changes the series has gone through, and after RE4, I was just happy to get a Resident Evil game that kind of played like Resident Evil 4, but brought everything back to survival horror and reminded me of games like Dead Space 1 or Evil Within or The Last of Us. If you're a fan of those games, but you have a problem with this remake or the second game's remake, why? If you're a fan of like Dead Space, I never understand that. If you don't like those games and you don't like your survival horror, you know, over the shoulder third person, that's fine, or first person, you just like fixed camera angles, you know, and tank controls and the rest of it, that's cool. I get it, okay? That's the design and style that you like and that you want to stick with. That's fine. I don't know why, I've always said this, I don't know why Capcom can't create an old school style Resident Evil game, you know, and then give it to the fans of you know, fixed camera angles and tank controls, because I would love that. I'd play that in a heartbeat. It's great to have something that's classic and retro, you know, and very nostalgic. But as it is, I really like the Resident Evil 2 remake. That's a personal. With this, it's on the same level as something like RE0. It's a 7 out of 10 Resident Evil game, you know. Code Veronica in my score system in my head gets like an 8, close to a 9. It's like an 8.5 out of 10. But 0 and this, along with maybe Resident Evil 5, are pretty much like 7 out of 10, you know, Resident Evil games. And this is in that pile, definitely. Not massively bad, yeah. It's still an enjoyable game in its own right, but just not a good remake and not the best Resident Evil game. And the problem is, I wanted this to better the Resident Evil 2 remake. I wanted this to blow me away. I wanted to get the giant spiders and crows back in, have a boss fight with the Gravedigger, and it doesn't have any of that stuff. It cuts enemies, it cuts locations, it shortens the experience. It does shorten the experience, I don't care what anyone says. There's a difference between the experience actually being short and you completing a game, you know, in a short amount of time. Like, this is on the same level as RE7 in terms of length, yeah? But in RE7, you still go and backtrack and explore more, and there's more puzzles. In this, it's that, but just downgraded, you know, cut back. Other things that aren't in this that I was really disappointed by: no enhanced ammos. What else? A lack of costumes. Yeah, you get Jill's old school Resident Evil 1 outfit, and if you pre-order the game, I believe you get her classic Resident Evil Nemesis outfit from 1999. But yeah, other than that, there's hardly any costumes that I saw. Weapons like the Mine Thrower, the Terminator 2 Winchester style shotgun, yeah, they're gone. Like, you do get to upgrade your handgun, but you don't get that Magnum that you got in the original. You do get, like, the Samurai Edge, which is the STAR's, you know, weapon of choice. And in all fairness to the game, you do get a choice of different weapons, like infinite rocket launchers and some other things, you know, the rifle that Carlos has and stuff at the end, and you can actually get, like, infinite ammo and stuff if you spend coins at the end of the game, and that's cool. But you don't get those iconic weapons from the original, the Mine Thrower, the shotgun, you know, and that weird, like, Magnum, like I said, that rapid firing Magnum. You get to upgrade your handgun, and that's fine, but you get like a silencer on it, which I never understood, because what good is a silencer, you know, during a zombie outbreak? This isn't Metal Gear Solid, this isn't Splinter Cell. We're not trying to sneak past things, you know, or use stealth. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong, I'm British, I don't really know about guns because we don't really have guns over here. So maybe the silencer, you know, makes the shot more accurate. I really don't know. I'm not too sure. We do get a red dot sight and extended clip, but overall, there was no real use for it. Like, I didn't feel like the upgrades to the handgun made it better, and later on you get like a rapid firing handgun, which is a lot better anyway. So you kind of just ditch the first handgun you pick up. We do get some upgrades for the shotgun that make it a little bit like the combat shotgun from Resident Evil Remake, but I didn't see a massive difference. The shotgun's quite cool in this because, you know, it's quite powerful. In RE2 Remake, it wasn't as powerful until you got like the upgrade for it. But in this, if you pop a shot at a zombie's head or even just at their chest, they go down pretty much. And then you can just knife them or, you know, shoot them in the head just to make sure. But overall, the weapons were a little bit disappointing. The grenade launcher is straight out of Resident Evil 5, the one that Chris gets his hands on, or Sheva. And yeah, that's what replaces the classic like bloop gun, as people call it, where it's fire a shot, then reload it. You know, it's the grenade launcher from Terminator 2. But then again, thinking about things and the way the Nemesis is in this game, it's good to have a grenade launcher that can rapid fire, you know, so it does make a difference when it comes to fighting the Nemesis. So yeah, I don't mind the new grenade launcher, but the mine thrower is relegated to an ammo type for the grenade launcher. That's what it's relegated to. So yeah, a bit disappointed with the weapon set overall, but how the guns handle and how they are, I wasn't disappointed with. I like them and the designs and stuff. So yeah. So first I want to talk about enemies that have been cut. We have the flatworms cut, the gravedigger, which is ridiculous. I don't even understand. That's what I'm trying to say. They could have added some length to the game just by putting in these old school boss battles and these old encounters and some of these enemies, but instead they don't. Yeah, we don't have a fight with the gravedigger. The gravedigger is non-existent in this game. Flatworms aren't in it. The brain suckers aren't in it. The giant spiders, the crows, they weren't in the Resident Evil 2 remake. They're not in this. There's no giant moths, which I thought they might make up for the Resident Evil 2 remake and have a giant moth in this. They're not. The Jane Demio is only in it, like I said, for one segment, and then you never see them again. And we only get one more Hunter Gamma towards the end of the game. Just think of it from our point of view as classic fans of Resident Evil Nemesis 1999. Just put yourself in my position after you finish the game. You're sitting there and thinking, why did you cut the Gravedigger out? And why did you cut these other enemy encounters out? You could have lengthened the game by about 2 hours and made it a little bit longer with these new enemy encounters. Had different sections with the brain suckers. Like you did with the Drain Demio's nest. There's ideas and decisions I don't understand. And it's not just enemies. They cut locations out. Like I said, they cut the clock tower. You don't get to visit the clock tower to actually explore it. And there are actually people out there making excuses for this. And I don't understand your logic or your thinking. Like, I don't care whether you're saying, oh, well, the clock tower didn't add anything to the game. Yes, it did. What the hell were you talking about? It was a chance to visit a gothic set location like we had in previous games, in previous Resident Evils. You know, it was a break from Raccoon City and maybe the more futuristic, more modern settings. And so we got to explore this gothic, you know, architectural building, which was the clock tower. Resident Evil has always had gothic architecture as well as modern and futuristic settings. Like, do you know what I mean? It just makes sense. In this, it's just a background. It's a set dressing so you can fight the Nemesis during a boss battle. I'm sorry, but that's massively disrespectful to the original source material, the original game, and it shows you they rushed this out of the door. They did, and that's what makes me think they rushed out of the door, because they gutted this game and they took all these locations away and stuff. We don't get the park, like, not in the same way. It's just this small little area. I don't even think it's meant to be a recreation of the park. I think it's just this small kind of area with trees and a bit of grass and stuff, okay? Yeah, and the park was a lengthy, like, segment within the original, and then it led to the Dead Factory. We don't get the Dead Factory. Instead, I think the Dead Factory's mixed in, kind of like how they did with the Resident Evil 2 remake, where they mixed in some of the factory settings when you fight Birkin, you know, with the huge, like, crate and stuff, the metal crate. They mixed a bit of the factory kind of location in with that boss battle, and they sort of do that with this, where the Dead Factory, I think, is almost supposed to be mixed into this arena that you fight the Nemesis in for a third time, and it doesn't make any sense. There's zombies coming out of cages. I'm like, who's letting them out? Why does this fight have to have zombies coming out of cages? There's all these electric pylon things, or these electric generators that you have to shoot to knock the Nemesis down, and they also contain, like, acid in them as well. So it was like, what the hell was going on? Like, it didn't make any sense. It was a bit stupid. But, you know, compared to, like, Resident Evil 2 Remake, where it was cleverly made and there was certain decisions and designs that were thought out, in RE2 Remake, you take Ben Bertolucci, for instance, in the cells, yeah, and the underground parking lot. He gets killed by Mr. X. He pops his head, see his eyeball hanging out. It's fucking gross. Not only did I like the new death of Ben Bertolucci at the hands of the Tyrant, I also loved the original death of Ben Bertolucci in the original RE2, where, you know, the G-Mutant splits him open, pops out of him. But I love both deaths equally, like, the same. I really like the new death and how it plays with fans' expectations. You think the same thing's going to happen, G-Mutant's going to pop out of him. It doesn't. Instead, the Tyrant gets him and smashes his skull, you know, crushes his skull. And then after that, you have to get through the cells with the Tyrant coming after you, and there's zombies in all these cells, right? And you know, when you go there first to meet Ben Bertolucci the first time, you know these zombies are going to pop out of them cages, but there's a reasoning behind it. They're all trapped in these cells, and you know that when you restore power, the cells are going to open and they're going to come out. You don't realise that Mr. X is going to come after you either. So it leaves this tense moment of having to use a grenade to stop, you know, Mr. X, to put the zombies out of commission and basically run past them all. And that's a great moment. In terms of a gameplay situation, a moment of tense sort of like atmosphere and all that other stuff, it's brilliantly crafted and created, and it makes sense. It makes sense that you would open, you know, Ben Bertolucci's cage to get that ID card, and then all the other cells are going to open, all the zombies flood out, and then Mr. X, having just killed Ben, you know, comes after you. It makes sense. It just makes sense logistically as well. In Resident Evil 3 Remake, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense why you're suddenly in this huge cylindrical like arena. You know, the Nemesis is running around sort of like behind these generators. You have to shoot the generators, knock him down. They contain acid as well for whatever reason, I don't know. And then on top of that, you've got zombies coming out of cages. Who the fuck is letting them out of cages? I don't know. It isn't Carlos. It isn't Jill. Nikolai's done one. He's off. Like, he's gone by the time, you know, this happens. This boss battle happens. So it makes no sense. Like, it's weird and it doesn't make sense. Compared to the previous moment I just mentioned in RE2 Remake, that is planned out and executed perfectly, and it makes sense, okay, logistically. This doesn't make sense logistically. Now, if you want to look at it as just being a bit of fun and, you know, why am I being so serious? I didn't ever use the words realism and trying to make Resident Evil realistic. Capcom did that. When you try to use a word like that and then come with something like this, it's kind of stupid. It makes you look a bit dumb. Yeah, that's like me saying certain things and then, you know, looking kind of dumb, right? If I didn't have my facts or I was just talking out my arsehole, then I would look stupid. And that's kind of what Capcom have done with this. Well, we didn't want giant spiders in it because they're kind of goofy and silly and we're going for that more realistic tone. But you'll put a giant rail cannon that Jill holds instead of having a more realistic version of that, like in the original Nemesis, where it was just this hunk of metal that had to charge up and you had to get the Nemesis in front of it. Way more realistic boss battle and just scenario compared to this. So don't talk about realism ever again, Capcom. Stop trying to be realistic and put realism in a Resident Evil game. It can have a certain amount of realism, but just realise that your fan base ain't dumb. Yeah, I'm not a stupid person. You can't fob people off, yeah, just for certain decisions and things you've cut. Just be honest with everybody. Just say, look, we didn't spend as much time on this game as we did with the Remake of 2. It wasn't in development as much. You know, people wanted it. We got it out the door. Whatever. Just be real. Just be real with your fans, yeah? Your long-time fans especially as well, because we've been there from the very beginning, and we're the ones putting money in your pockets, yeah, and putting money in your bank account. So stop bullshitting us. That's all I'm saying. No one wants Resident Evil to be overly hyper-realistic. I've never wanted that. I'm perfectly fine with that. Metal Gear Solid had a little bit of realism, but was never overly hyper-realistic, okay? And I never had an issue with that. I've never had an issue with games, you know, being a bit silly. I love Doom Eternal. Recently played Doom Eternal. I would advise you to buy that game over this for 50 quid. Definitely. Goodbye. This, not so good for £50. You wait for it to go down to £25, you're getting a decent game. Yeah. But, no, not 50. So yeah, this is kind of the part of the review where I start talking about certain plot choices. And one of those is Brad getting killed by Carlos Oliveira and not by the Nemesis. You know, he gets bit by a zombie in the original game, I know that, but then he gets taken out by the Nemesis. And a lot of people have said, well, it doesn't really, who cares? It doesn't make the Nemesis less scary. Well, yeah, duh. Like, of course it doesn't. Like, even if Brad didn't get killed by the Nemesis in the first game, I still would have found him scary as hell. But at the same time, it adds weight to Jill's, you know, wanting revenge. It shows you that he killed a STARS member. He actually did kill a STARS member. In this, he doesn't kill any STARS members. He just kills some UBCS officers. So yeah, there's a certain reason as to why a lot of us are disappointed by that. It fucking sucks at the end of the day, and I don't care what type of argument you want to aim at me and come up with reasons. I don't care. Like, I wanted him to get taken out by the Nemesis. It doesn't happen. Carlos is the one to take him out. However, I will say his interaction with Marvin, that whole scene and stuff that they did was really, really good, and I did like it. And we get to see how Marvin gets bitten, you know, and eventually becomes zombie Marvin. So that was cool. That was fine. But I just wish he would have been taken out by the Nemesis. He does have a redemptive arc, much like in the original Nemesis, where he tells Jill to just get out of there. You know, they both know how things are going to play out, and yeah, and he basically risks his life for her. So I think that's really cool. Does the same in the original Nemesis. People don't remember that he actually comes to the RPG to warn her. He could have just legged it, you know, or just given up, shot himself, or whatever. But he actually tries to save Jill, and then gets taken out by the Nemesis. So, you know, it is what it is. We don't get to see, and as much as I like the new intro for this game, we don't get to see the SWAT and also the RPD taking on the waves of zombies, the zombie army, and get decimated by them. So we don't get to see that, and that is a shame. I wish we could have had both Jill's, like, you know, intro segment and get to see the SWAT team and the police get taken over by the zombie army. We don't get to see that in this, and I think that was a missed opportunity. It's such an iconic intro. It's probably one of the best Resident Evil intros, I think. It's up there in my top 10, 100%. It might even be like my top 3rd favourite intro, maybe even top 2 of any Resident Evil game. So yeah, we don't get to see that. It's taken out and it's removed entirely, and we only get to see kind of Jill in her apartment building, which is fine in its own right. But there's no build up to the Nemesis. The Nemesis just shows up and he's after Jill. And as much as that's cool, and the way that he is presented is really cool, where he busts through the wall as she's finished, you know, answering a call from Brad. Yeah, it just in the original there was this build up until you got to see the Nemesis, and in this, you don't get that. It's more in your face. So it just depends on how you are as a person, your personal preference. Do you like that more, or do you like the originals build up more? I prefer the originals build up more. I like horror when it builds and builds, and then we get to see like a crescendo instead of it just being like boom in your face. There you go. There's the Nemesis. So yeah, that's all personal preference at the end of the day. And the most egregious thing that they've done in terms of removing stuff from the story is there's no Barry Burton rescue in this game. I know there's 2 endings in the original. This only has 1, but Barry Burton doesn't show up to rescue Carlos and Jill, and I think that is such a missed opportunity. I really do. I mean, loads of people love Barry Burton. He's just a wicked character within the series, and the fact we don't get a cameo from him, that sucks, man. Like, I like that ending the most. I always choose that ending. I know a lot of fans always go for that ending, you know, instead of just the Carlos and Jill escape one. Like, it's got gravitas, it's got weight. I love that he comes to rescue Jill. It makes up for his betrayal in the first game. Again, much like the Nemesis killing Brad in the original, there are a whole heap of reasons as to why this holds so much weight for us old school fans, you know, and I just wish they would have, you know, put Barry in there. We get a Chris Redfield cameo at the end of the game, which I thought was cool, but the Barry one's just, it makes more sense. Like, are they teasing the Code Veronica remake? Are they teasing some other game that continues after the 3rd game's remake? Who knows? I don't know. It was cool having a Chris Redfield cameo there, you know, and he's got his punching bag and he's in this apartment and stuff. Is he in France? I don't know. Eastern Europe, wherever it is. So that was interesting, but overall, yeah, they could have had both. You know, at the end of the day, they could have had Barry show up and have the Chris Redfield cameo. So, yeah, very disappointed in that. Very disappointing. Now, Capcom do slightly make up for the cut locations. They make the hospital segments a lot longer. The hospital's a lot bigger. It's a lot, you know, it's a longer segment than it was originally. And what else? I'm trying to think. Obviously, the Nest 2. That's exactly what it's called. You heard me right. It's called the Nest 2. Unoriginal in name, unoriginal in design. To be honest, it's literally a copy and paste of the Nest from RE2 Remake, you know, and put into this game. And whereas I like the Nest in the RE2 Remake, I thought they did a good job with that redesigned sort of lab, you know. In the original, it's very rusty and just very metal, and, you know, the Hive is a completely different sort of location from the Nest. The Nest was a lot more modern and a lot more futuristic in tech, you know, in technology. And I like what they did with it. In this, they have like, it's almost like an extension of the Nest that you visit in RE2 Remake, literally. And it's alright, it's okay. It's not a bad location, it's just not impressive in any way, and it's just unoriginal, you know. But I do like that the hospital is a lot bigger and it's a lot lengthier as a section, you know, of the game. It doesn't really make up for the cut locations. This is hard. Like, with Resident Evil 2 Remake, they made the sewers bigger, they made the underground parking lot bigger, you know, because they got rid of certain locations and stuff. But in the original Resident Evil 2, those locations only appeared for a small amount of time, so I was happy to get the kind of the new sewers and new, the other locations, the new locations, the new sort of hive, which is the nest and all this other stuff. But yeah, in this, it's like they've cut locations so much that a longer section of the hospital just doesn't make up for it. And the hospital worked as a smaller section of the game, in my personal opinion, than it does here. And I found myself getting a little bit bored, exploring the hospital. I will say that. So there are moments in this game where I did find myself getting a little bit bored, and that's to do with a lot of cutscenes, and lengthy ones at that, as well as lingering too much on these locations that I didn't find as interesting as the clock tower or the park, or the dead factory. The nest isn't a replacement for the dead factory, in my personal opinion. It just isn't. And there's a lot of basic locations, basic horror settings. That's one thing I will say. There's a lot of just underground sort of just everyday locations that you come across in horror games, do you know what I mean? And there's a sewer section which wasn't even in the original that is literally a copy and paste of the sewer sections but smaller from Resident Evil 2 Remake. You can tell this game was rushed and it was literally fired out really, really quick. I don't care how long they say they had time to develop it. It was fired out quickly and it got attached to their money maker, which is Project Resistance. It's just to say that you have a campaign there, but we hope that you play Project Resistance more, and we hope you buy our loot boxes and pay to play and all that other crap and pay to win and whatever else they've got in that fucking diabolical thing that they developed, which is Project Resistance. At least that's what I'm saying, at least we got a 7 out of 10 Resident Evil game and experience from this campaign. There was still a fair bit of love and attention to detail put into this remake, but it just doesn't beat the Resident Evil 2 remake at all in any way. It's a way worse remake and a way worse game. And you can tell me to go and play the original if I don't like it and all this other crap. What I'm trying to say to you is I do like parts of it, that's what I'm saying, but it's been gutted to the point where, I'd rather go back and play the original over this. That's what I'm saying. Like, I would rather go back and play the original Nemesis, because this isn't a patch on that game. It really isn't. At least with Resident Evil 2 Remake, I can play the original and play the remake, the original Resident Evil 2 and play the Resident Evil 2 Remake, and feel quite content that both versions are enjoyable and I like both versions of it. It doesn't beat the original, but I still really like the remake, and it still provides me with hours of enjoyment. And yes, the Resident Evil remake, the remake of the first game, that beats Director's Cut hands down. It's a better game, but I still love the cheesy campiness of the original as well. So, I have the cheesy campiness to go back to if I want to with the original Resident Evil Director's Cut, or I can go and play the remake, which is a lot more serious and a lot darker and has, more content added on top of it. And that's the thing. The Resident Evil remake is the best remake still, because it never cut anything. It just added on top of, already existing ideas and the base game. Literally. So it's the best remake to date. Yeah, and for other reasons as well. It's a Shinji Mikami directed game. A lot of the development team that worked on the original Resident Evil came back for that remake, and it was lightning in a bottle. It's a fire remake, and none of the remake's going to beat it, but I think the RE2 remake did a good job with what it had and what it did, and was to an extent quite respectful of the source material and of the original Resident Evil 2. This, on the other hand, is rushed, it's gutted, and it just isn't as respectful. And I would rather play Resident Evil Nemesis, 1999 Nemesis, no matter how old that game is, I'd rather go back and play that. And I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that I could have a remake that was just as good as the original Nemesis, and I could play both and be perfectly happy. If I wanted to play the newer Resident Evil remake, I could play that. If I wanted to go and get some retro vibes, I could play the original. But as it is, I don't have those feelings, and I can't. I'd rather go back and play the original because it did things better at the end of the day, and I prefer it to this remake. This remake feels like it tried to copy from Uncharted, Last of Us, or Metal Gear Solid, and it's weaker in that aspect because it's trying to be more thematic. It's trying to put more cutscenes and tell this story, and while the story is told in an alright way, yeah, it's still cool. It's still a little bit like the original story, and it does have these great moments. It still rushes you. Like, this game moves at such a breakneck fucking pace that you don't have time to just, to stop and breathe and explore. It moves at that crazy breakneck pace, and it's extremely linear. It's a very linear experience from start to finish. Unlike the Resident Evil 2 remake, which yes was a short game in how you played it, but it never tried to rush you. You still had exploration and backtracking, and there was a lot more exploration and gameplay than there is in this game. Capcom would have led you to believe that Raccoon City is massive and huge and almost open world in its design. Bullshit, it's not. It's closed off, it's very linear, and you are funneled down a set path. And they want you to get from one story beat to the next. That's literally how this game plays out, and that is why it's short. That is why it's short. Not because you can complete it in a short amount of time, it's because you play it in a short amount of time. Literally, you don't get a chance to, you know, to take it in and maybe make it last a bit longer. Instead, they're trying to just move you to the next part. And Raccoon City isn't that big. Realistically, the RPD and the original version of Raccoon City and Nemesis seem a lot bigger, a lot more labyrinthian, and a lot more open-ended, definitely. So that is disappointing. Now, there is gameplay in this game, there is. Like, you get to explore the hospital, you get to explore the streets of Raccoon City, but it just moves you at such a quick pace, you know, compared to like other Resident Evil games. It's the fastest moving Resident Evil game that I know of to date. Now, Resident Evil 4 is quite fast-paced and it moves at a quick pace, but it's long. That's the difference. It's a long experience. So that's what I'm saying. That's why this doesn't match up to something like that, because it's over in like a couple hours. It literally takes about 4 hours if you're taking your time, 4 to 5 hours if you're taking your time. If you speedrun it, if you rush through it like you do with previous Resident Evil games, you could complete this in maybe 2 hours. 2.5 hours, definitely. So yeah, it's very, very short. It's a very short experience. It's extremely quick paced, and that is a detriment to it, definitely. Some games are quick paced and they're fine, okay? Devil May Cry 5, DMC, but they always seem to be a little bit longer, you know. So yeah, this is just, it's too quick for its own good. That's the thing I could say about this. I'm going to end the review here. Like I said, a lot of negative points, stuff that really, you know, disappointed me. And it is a shame, because I wanted this game to be really good. I wanted it to be great, and it's just it just hits that score of 7 out of 10 for me personally. It is a shame. I would advise you go and buy Doom Eternal. That is my pick and my choice for this year. Haven't played Final Fantasy VII Remake yet. I'm hearing there's a lot of people that aren't happy with it. A lot of old school fans that aren't happy with the way the story plays out. I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan. I've only played bits of 7, finished 8, and played up until the end of 9, and that's about it. Final Fantasy 15 bored the shit out of me. I got rid of it straight away. But yeah, like, I'm not a huge Final Fantasy fan. But what I did play of the demo for FF7 Remake, I really enjoyed and I liked. And it was the first time where I thought, you know, I might pick up this Final Fantasy game and actually see what everybody's talking about. I do like Advent Children. I love that movie. So, you know, like, I'm not too sure. I don't have any real context as to how the story plays out in the original. I did get a quick run through as an extra on Advent Children, where you can see what happened during the events of FF7. But other than that, I'm not too knowledgeable about Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, I'm not too sure about the game. So that's one that I'm going to pick up a little bit later. When it comes to Last of Us 2, that's been delayed. So, you know, I was waiting for that, to be honest. I don't know about it. I feel I'm one of those people that feels like Last of Us 1 should never have got a sequel, but it is, and I'll have to see how it goes, you know, before I pick it up. But I would say Doom Eternal, personally, for me, and if you're looking for a game to get, like, if you only have the money for one game, you know, for this year, or at least these few months, I would get Doom Eternal, hands down, over Resident Evil 3 Remake, definitely. And that's a shame for me to say, because as much as I love Doom, I'm more of a Resident Evil fan. But yeah, it's just a better game. Doom Eternal is like a 9 out of 10, and this is a 7, so I would pick Doom Eternal up over this, definitely. You'll get more fun out of it, it's a better game, and it's a bit more challenging as well. Overall, RE3 Remake isn't a bad game. In and of itself, it's not. It's not a bad experience. It's not the worst game ever made, or the worst remake ever made, or it's not complete trash. None of that. But it just isn't worth that £50 price tag, and it's worth renting first before you decide to maybe pick it up and buy it. If you think you're going to replay it, I mean, I'll probably replay it just because I'm a huge Resident Evil fan, but if you don't think you're going to replay it, it's really not worth buying and picking up. You might as well just rent it. Or pick it up when it's dirt cheap, because I'm sure it's gonna go down in price quite quickly. Or you know what, just pick up Resident Evil 2 Remake if you don't own that, or the Resident Evil collection if you don't own those. And just play those instead. Buy those and play those instead, and then wait for this to come down to like a tenner. you know, or 15 quid, and then pick it up. It is a cool little bookend to the Resident Evil 2 remake. It's just not as good, like in terms of quality and gameplay and the amount of thought that's gone into it. That's the problem. So it's not a trash game, no way, but it's just not a good remake. You know, it's an okay Resident Evil game. That's how I'm gonna leave it. It's a 7 out of 10 from me. I wish I could have given it higher. I wish it could have hit the peaks that Resident Evil 2 remake hit and the first game's remake hit, but it just doesn't. It's disappointing in general, and that's kind of how I stand with it at the end of the day. So yeah, I hope I didn't depress you too much. Obviously, when we're talking about negatives and stuff, you know, then it can be a little bit depressing in the fact that I don't love everything, but do you know what I mean? Not everything is going to impress me, that's the thing, and I'm not just going to sit there, and if something it's lacking and it's being cut and it's rushed out the door, I'm not going to lie and say, okay, this is a perfect game when it's not, do you know what I mean? And no game's perfect, no film's perfect, you know, no piece of music, all that other stuff, but at the same time, being such a huge fan of Resident Evil and a fan of the original, I wasn't impressed by it. That's what I will say. And this is to everybody saying, well, why don't you just go and play the original? Being like posted 10 million times by other people. It's like people copy and paste comments and just put them in the comment section. I've played the original so many times. I've played all the originals so many times because I started off with Director's Cut. So they're the only games I had to play at that point in time. There were no remakes at that point in time. I've already played all the originals, okay? I wanted to play something new, a new take on the classic Nemesis. That's why I bought and played this. It's not a bad game, not a bad game. It's just not very impressive. Okay? And that's where I'll leave that. If you enjoyed this video, even though it's been a bit of a negative one, but I did say some of the positives at the beginning, those positives still stand. And maybe over time, if I play it more and more, I'll grow to like it a bit more. I did with Zero, and I did with Code Veronica. But yeah, look. Hopefully you enjoyed the review anyway. Hopefully it didn't depress you too much. This is only one person's opinion. You might have loved it. And if you love it, I'm not knocking you for that, okay? So I'll never do that. I'm not that sort of person. If you enjoyed the video and you want to keep up to date with more Resident Evil content that I put out, because I'll be doing lore videos and reviews and everything else, then subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I've been System Check 66, and once again, I'm signing out of here. Peace.